back in those days, especially when you were that first band, were you working any side jobs, or were you making all your money just from playing with the group?
Oh no, yeah, no. We had to do. We had little part-time jobs. I ended up working in a music store, which was great. I worked at Goodman Music for 3 years, and what was nice about that was it was a front row seat for all the latest gear. And I was working there from 80 to like 82, I think, right when MIDI came out. So to be working in a store that sold keyboards and synthesizers when the MIDI system was first introduced was was great because I understood everything. I didn't have, and as the gear would come into the shop, I learned how to use it, and that was part of the deal because you had to demo gear to sell it. Um, but yeah, so that actually, even though it was a part-time job, and I'm sure I would have rather been out playing music at the time, that would turn out to be a great gig because it really opened, um, uh, and that's how I got into the programming thing. I did a stint for a while, even when the Fence were out playing a lot. I started doing a studio thing. There was a transitional period, I'd say, from the early '80s ah, to somewhere in the middle late '80s, about 5 or 7 years, where it was normal for a recording session to hire an engineer and a keyboard programmer, and someone would come in and MIDI up. Layer up a bunch of sounds and put stuff together, put patches together, recreate sounds if needed, gussy things up, whatever. But that was a gig. That was a thing to be a keyboard programmer, a synth programmer on recording sessions. So I did that for a couple of years, and that's how I met Miles. I was doing synth programming on sessions um, for a bunch of artists that were recording at the Ray Parker studio in Studio City. One of them was Randy Hall. He hired me for lots of projects, and he also was involved with Miles. He's the guy that sang the title track, "The Man with the Horn,"
Oh, okay.
on that comeback album that Miles made. I think that came out in like '80. And so I was working for Randy, and Randy said, "Hey, we're going to be doing a session with Miles, and so get ready." And we did, and I think Miles, when he was just fascinated with stuff that's new. He was always kind of cutting edge in that way, and he was always interested in how technology could expand what he was doing. And I think he looked at me as this, moldable younger guy that at least knew how to hook up all this stuff, and he could mold me into what he wanted to, which is kind of a soundscape approach, which I definitely figured out while I was playing with him. Um, not necessarily always specific musical parts, but textures and sounds that would kind of come in and out. Also musical parts too, covering
Yeah.
lines, doubling parts up. He loved the mini moog bass, and there's a number of tunes where I doubled up mini moog bass with the bass player, and there's a lot of things about the new world of synthesizers that he was interested in. This is 1985. This is just when the synthesizers just started to sound. Blah. This was just when synthesizers started to sound really good. Oberheim had just come out with the 8 voice, PPG Wave, Fairlight systems, DX7s. All these things, they're all different families of keyboards, but they all have amazing sound. Which people now the retro trend is driven in large part because people want those sounds. And so that was it. All kind of came together, for me then. The technology, meeting Miles, having worked in the keyboard store.
And so
Um,
that was your first break really into the industry, was meeting Miles.
my first big break, yeah,
Yeah.
as a player for sure, and that basically that completely put me on the map, and yeah, that was you know very very major. I mean, especially it's it's more than playing. Being hired by Miles is more than just a break. It's like um,
An
it's like
honor.
yeah, really, yeah. I can't find the right word for it actually, but yeah.
How did your work change from when he first called you throughout the years when you were playing with him? Was it basically all the same? You're doing the same stuff the whole time, or did it kind of morph?
it morphed. Well, my role morphed anyway. I mean, when I first joined, it was more uh, kind of half musician, half synth programmer. And by the time I left him, which was 4 years later, I was musical director, which meant that which actually, when I joined the band, Robert Irving III was musical director. Brilliant keyboard player from Chicago, fantastic. He wrote a lot of the music on the album Decoy. I don't know
Hmm.
if you're familiar with. Anyway, so he was sort of the main keyboard player. He did the comping and more of the interactive keyboard playing, and I was sort of doubling up on parts and adding textures. But that slowly morphed into both of us were more or less doing something similar, playing parts, some shared comping. We got into a spontaneous orchestration thing where we would each kind of move around with orchestral kind of sound, and it would sound almost like we could have arranged it. But so we had a lot of, you know, the keyboard role eventually blurred, but I kind of pioneered the idea of having a second keyboardist in a jazz band, and that was
That's really just
I
for synth parts.
pretty sure I was one of the first guys doing that, and yeah, especially in a highly visible band. But yeah, and eventually Robert Irving left, and I fell into the musical director role. And basically, for me, in that situation, Miles' relationship with Bobby Irving was probably more collaborative. They wrote together and stuff like that. Whereas my role was more of like doing musical chores for Miles. I would write charts for him. I'd transcribe stuff. He would tell me to get the band, up and running on a certain number. Then he would walk in and change everything around. Um, you know, he would sit at the piano and play ideas, and I would record them and then try and transcribe them, or as close as I could transcribe them,
So
and
that's how you guys would learn the
translate that
material for the
to
record.
a chart that could be played. So there, it was kind of functional stuff, but I think you just froze.
Oh, you there?
You just froze there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What you saying?
There we
That's how
go.
I got what?
So is that that's how you guys would learn the material for the touring and for the records? Is basically
Oh.
he would just play it and then you would transcribe it.
Yeah, I mean, of new things. There's a couple, specifically one of the tunes that came out that was definitely created in that process was a song, a live. It's only available as a live track. It's on that album. It's called Intruder. It's on that album, Live Around the World. And Intruder was the name of the synth patch on a D50, and he used it a lot in that song. But no, yeah, there's a few specific things, but a lot of times the stuff would never make it to the band, but it would be a process that we would go through. But anyway, my role did change. It went definitely from being sort of a kind of a parts playing sideman to something more integral and covering definitely a lot more ground. I mean, one interesting point is I joined the band, and it was me. Obviously, it was Miles and me, and uh, a set of excellent players. And by the time I left the band, it was all the other players had changed. Everyone had changed. So I went through a whole transition with him. So that was also another real eye-opening experience. When I actually left the band, the whole band had completely turned over at that point.
And when you were at the peak of playing with him, how many dates a week were you on the road? Or how many weeks a year, sorry, were you on the road?
The biggest year we did was around 100 gigs.
Jeez, were you exhausted?
I can't imagine we were young and we were exhausted. I can't imagine how he managed. He had some deep well of energy. But yeah, uh, that was probably, it was 90 to 100 hits. And that was, we did in sort of, I think the busiest period that I was with him was I joined in 85 and I left in 89. And it was around 87, 88 that we had this ridiculous schedule.
Hmm.
Um, and but it was a little bit less before and a little bit less after. And he started getting tireder as more tired as the touring went on for other projects, and so I think they ended up spreading the gigs out a little bit more.
Gotcha.
But we were
And I
playing
know,
almost every night. We would do things like fly to Paris and play two concerts that night. The morning we got there. But I remember one particularly intense tour. I think it was '87. We flew to Paris, so we got to the hotel in the morning in Paris, and we played two arena shows that night,
geez.
part of this major Paris jazz festival thing.
Oh, and so it's, but that was not that was like a rare occasion that you'd be that
There
overworked.
would be that, but we probably still went on to play four more gigs that week, before we had a day off. I'm sure something like that. And also we would we would fly commercial, but and every mid-size and large city in Europe wanted Miles at their jazz festival. So we went to some far-flung places and we flew everywhere. So it was not uncommon to take three flights in one day and then play that night.
Now
You
that
know, you
sounds
have to,
absolutely miserable to
you have
me.
to fly from a small town to a hub city, and then a hub city, you catch another plane to somewhere else, another hub city in a different country, and then a small flight to a remote part of Italy or something like that. Oh, but the gigs were beautiful. I mean, Miles always played the best places, and people always really took care of us and stuff. So it wasn't really. I mean, the schedule was intense for sure, but it wasn't a slag of a tour. I've been on those too, and
Yeah.
it was everything was pretty much first class with Miles.
Now, when you have a packed week of shows, what is the one where you think you play the best? Because is there like a consistent day that you're like, if I got a show every single night this week, usually by this day is like that's usually the best show in terms of you being able to perform and not being too exhausted, but also not being too like anxious or stuff like that.
My buddy Nick Beggs, bass player, talks about the sweet spot of a tour. It's a phrase he uses a lot. I think it's about 10 gigs in, and then you're good for a couple weeks there where everything is awesome, and then you start to get fried.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, the perfect length tour to me is a 3 weeks or a month, because then you have a chance to really get into it, to be in the zone for a while, but you don't overdo it.